Our speaker today certainly needs no introduction to the congregation. He's been an establishment in UU longer than most of us. Bob Hill, a Marine once and always, raised in Eastern Virginia in a military family, frequent speaker and erudite member of our congregation, a practicing clinical psychologist for over 30 years in the Richmond and Abingdon areas. His topic today is something that's occupied all our minds recently, most likely. It's, oh no, not another war. And with that, we'll hear from Bob.
Thank you, Bill. Good job. Harry, it just dawned on me that your father probably planned some of the battles my father was in the Pacific. About 1 o'clock last Sunday, it hit me that I was going to have to follow Dr. Kelly Bremner, and that I would be followed by Dr. Paul Blaney. And I thought, what have I got myself into? These are two brilliant people who are very uplifting. But nevertheless, here we are. This is my Sunday. So please bear with me. My topic today is about war. And I assure you, I am no pacifist. I have marched to the drums of war. As some of you know, I would gladly go to Ukraine to fight the Russian criminals. But alas, at my age, the only way anyone would send me to Ukraine is if Russia was over here. So anyway, I would like to begin by reading a quote that was sent to me back in 2007 by one of our former members, Sybil Britton or Sybil Ditton. She was a member here, and unfortunately she died after a very tough battle with cancer. And I quote, "Beware of the leaders who bang the drums of war in order to whip the citizenry into a patriotic fervor. For patriotism is indeed a double-edged sword. It both emboldens the blood just as it narrows the mind. And when the drums of war have reached a fever pitch, the blood boils with hate and the mind is closed. The leaders will have no need to seize the rights of the citizenry. Rather, the citizenry, infused with fear and blinded patriotism, will offer up all of their rights unto the leader and do it gladly so. How do I know? I know, for this is what I have done, and I am Caesar." Close quote. I would like to argue that war is the most unreasonable activity that human beings can engage in. George Santayana, the philosopher, pointed out, and I quote, "There is nothing so helpless as reason when faced with unreason." Close quote. War is unreasonable, but it is more than that. It is madness taken to extreme. War represents a quintessential failure in humanity. When human beings decide to go to war, the perception of reality is maximally distorted, and reason is abandoned and replaced with magical delusion. We march excitedly off, filled with dreams of heroics and glory, only to find that carnage awaits our arrival. Delusions of grandeur are stripped away, and in its place, we're confronted with the bloody truth that we have once again been manipulated by those charged with our protection. I wonder how many times in a lifetime that the average person can declare, oh no, we're at war again. We can be sure that it is far too many. It seems that there's always some thug who wants more power or territory or wealth. On the other hand, it may be some xenophobic who wants to cleanse the territory of the under people. It may also be someone who is willing to resort to extreme violence in order to satisfy an inadequate ego. And to be sure, war has its religious overtones. Zealots know for certain that their view of God is superior to those who believe differently. Regardless of how war comes to be, sooner or later, we will all declare, oh no, we're at war again. You would think that we could learn not to murder each other, but it seems that the only thing war does is remind us that we are a foolish species. This is a perfect example of the old saying, you don't learn anything from history except we don't learn from history. Herodotus in the 5th century BCA was one of the first philosophers to attempt to understand war. Since that time, many great thinkers in history have investigated the causes of war, but in spite of their effort, we are all left with only theories. There is no good word for the makers of war. We call them thugs, hawks, and warmongers. But these names are too mild for the havoc they wreak. It is though there is an invisible substance that clouds the mind of politicians who declare war on other human beings. And then the cloud covers the rest of us as we march our sons and daughters off to the slaughter. We could just call it temporary insanity, but it is not temporary. There is no recovery. People are still dead. Cities are still destroyed. Children are orphaned. Mark Twain described humans as, I quote, the lowest animal, unquote, in Letters from the Earth. And to be sure, he makes a strong case. Maybe we just can't help it. Perhaps we are stuck at a low evolutionary level. Like dinosaurs, our brains are not big enough for the job we have to do. We come up with number 10 ideas, but we only have number 5 brains. Whatever the reason, we will all continue to say, oh no, we're at war again. If we all get blown to hell, there won't be anybody left to say, oops. Declaring war is not a do-over. Look at human history, the Crimean War, the Crusades, the Civil War, World Wars I and II, Korea, Vietnam, or Iraq. None of them are do-overs. Why weren't the designers of these widowmakers put in prison? Never have the soldiers marching off to war taken up arms against the war makers. And always, God is on everybody's side as human spirit sinks lower and lower. It seems that our brains are too weak and our nervous systems too excitable. Old men spout off the rhetoric of bravery, honor, and glory, and young men just want to go out and hurt somebody. Before you know it, the young girls will be crying and mothers will be mourning. We spend billions of dollars destroying countries, then more billions rebuilding it. We are masters of folly, and the clowns who started and promoted the wars get richer and richer. We perpetuate the idea of a mythical struggle against a mythical evil. Our professional soldiers lead our youth to don their armor and pretend to be mythical warriors. The cause is always in the service of sovereignty and freedom. That's not to say there isn't the absence of superior, ordinary heroics in military engagement. But that is not the heroics of poems and song, rhetoric and banners waving. Look at the human nervous system. Perhaps its most important design feature is fight or flight. We're designed to either escape or attack somebody if we feel the slightest threat. We are reflex bound, and our first response is primitive. The nervous system is constantly choosing to be a victim or a predator. When countries get big enough or armed enough, they choose predator every time. Small, poorly armed countries are usually the victim, and their non-armed citizens are written off as casualties of war. The truth of the matter is that everyone is a casualty of war, win or lose or draw. In our early history, predators were the lions and bears and snakes and other dangerous animals. Now our predators are other human beings. We fight over money, power, control, resources, bragging rights, and boundaries, and we can see that today. We fight over the slightest provocation, and if there is no provocation, we make up one. Simply put, we fight because of ego and ideology. Every single country should have an anti-war minister who makes the rest of us prove that beyond the shadow of a doubt, the war is the only option for our survival. Then we might have time to calm our at-the-ready reflexes. Part of the role of civilization is to condition humans to inhibit primitive responses. We have laws and rules against murder and fighting and other violent behaviors, but this does not apply to war making. We even make it honorable to participate in organized mass murder. Too many proud daddies encourage their sons to be men and whip the neighbor's kid. we still have this archaic notion that a man fighting is a manly thing to do. So naturally, war takes on this magical quality of manliness and honor. After all, it's what we were originally designed to do, but it is rarely necessary to resort to fisticuff, and it is even less necessary to engage in mass murder. If you condition the public to believe it is for God and country, we readily send our children. If it proves to be folly, we will still defend it, claiming that we must fight on so our children would not have died in vain. Sadly, young men and women do die in vain because of lies, ego, and ideology. It seems to me it's time to wake up. It's time to admit we have been duped. Wars are easily constructed. All you have to do is find or invent a bad guy or a sinner. As Rollo May phrased it, and I quote, "At the outset of every war, we hastily transform our enemy into the image of a demonic," close quote. We declare our enemy evil. We have a superordinate goal. This is a goal so overlooming that we forget our petty differences and we all march off to slay the dragon. What we forget is that the dragon lives within each of us. And as we slay the dragon, we slay ourselves, slowly, imperceptibly. There are dozens of reasons for war, but they seem to all boil down to three basic things. Number one, we remain vulnerable to manipulation. Number two, we're still emotionally primitive. And number three, we frequently let sociopaths come to power. An insane leader does not imply that the leaders are stupid. Certainly, for the most part, they know how to motivate us into doing their bidding by using our human drives and needs. They play us like fiddles while they follow ancient scripts written in the pages of antiquity. They fiercely defend the necessity for war while we nod our heads in group approval. How can it be that some philosophers view it so differently? The Roman poet Juvenal said, quote, "Now we suffer the evils of a long peace," close quote. The great philosopher Hegel put it this way, quote, "War has the higher meaning that through it, the ethical health of a nation is maintained," close quote. And Sir Arthur Keith, the noted physical anthropologist, had this to say, quote, "Nature keeps her orchard healthy by pruning. War is her pruning hook," close quote. Perhaps we prune the wrong limbs. Thomas Jefferson, one of my favorite heroes, had this to say, that dead bodies are just fodder for the earth. War never fulfills what it promises. It promises glory and delivers carnage. It promises peace, but only leads to more war. It promises superiority, but only reduces both sides to the same low level. It promises freedom, but only delivers the necessity for constant vigilance. And it promises economic prosperity, but it only leaves debt for our grandchildren. So why do we do it? We do it because someone told us that we have an enemy, and if we didn't fight them, they would hurt us. We do it because we think that we're right and they are wrong. We do it for our particular Almighty God. And some of us do it because we are young, stupid, and impressionable. Some of us do it because we've always done it. We have been skirting around one of the important issues, and that is there are two kinds of war: the mythical war and the war of reality. The mythical war is a war of fable and folklore, a war of stories and song and mythical heroes. We call these the King Arthur Wars. King Arthur and his noble knights fought against evil and wrongdoers. They rescued maidens, restored rights, and noble purpose. We all serve this noble idea, to dream the impossible dream. It is all too easy to arouse this dream. All we have to do is be told that evil is afoot and we must defend against it. Well, it just isn't that way. War is not mythical. War is real. The dead are still dead. Now, war is not always unavoidable in some instances. It is necessary to defend ourselves. If Genghis Khan, or if the Genghis Khans and the Hitlers and the Mussolinis and our current sociopath, Trump and Putin, had not come to power, humanity would not have suffered so much. Reality dictates that the world community must stand against maniacal thugs. But thugship must be determined by the world community and not by a single individual or ideological group. What happens generally, however, can be summed up in this quote from Bertrand Russell. Quote, "Our world has sprouted a weird concept of security and a warped sense of morality. Weapons are sheltered like treasure, and children are exposed to incineration." Perhaps the most extraordinary thing about war is that even the most mild-mannered, peace-loving people can easily buy into the idea that people of a different country or color or religion are evil and must be destroyed. It is also true that often all the combatants feel that they have God on their side and they're fighting a mythic battle to save the world. We fight fire with fire on both sides, and we're willing to let hell rain down on the enemy because they are not like us. Within a matter of minutes or a few days, some group or country can go from being a good trading partner to total evil. Jerry Falwell, one of the extreme Christian leaders of the Christian church made it very clear that battle lines had to be drawn between enemies. He said, and I quote, "War is not between fundamentalists and liberals, but between those who love Jesus and those who hate him." War and rumors of war always bring on a quality of magical thinking. We are good and they are bad. We are right and they are wrong. And of course, we have God on our side. President George Bush I said, "We were establishing a new order." Well, where is it? Where is the New Deal, the Great Society, the 1,000 years of peace? Where is our love for our fellow human beings? Where are all the promises that didn't come true? We can be sure promises were just a means to achieve the ambitions of politicians. Our spirituality comes at a high cost. We have to relinquish our most primitive instincts. We have to recognize our oneness and our sameness with all members of the human family. We have to dialogue with our enemy to see that we are not so different. We must make our enemies our neighbors. Though it has not happened yet, I still believe that the human family can rise above organized mass murder and eventually settle down and solve the real problems in this world. Thank you.